One of the things I've grown to really appreciate in games during the last few years is good level design. You don't really consider it much while you're in the middle of playing, but there's a ton of thought put into even the smallest details that make the best levels feel as good as they do. I'm an older, wiser man now, though. I played through my fair share of masterpieces, and my fair share of turd muffins. Because of that, I think I have a better understanding of just how hard it is to have a consistently thorough amount of quality in each level of your game. There's a personal favorite of mine that managed to do just that, though. You've read the title, so you already know the name. Devil May Cry 3 is one of only a handful of games I've played that I would consider timeless. The definition I've decided to give such a lofty term when it comes to video games is pretty simple. I'm able to enjoy these types of games just as much as when I first played them, if not more so, no matter how long it's been since then. The vacuum-tight level design in DMC3 is a huge factor in me calling it that. The game is split up into 20 different missions, each of which can last from around 10 to 30 minutes apiece. Maybe longer if you're like me and unleash your inner primate with some good old button mash before getting boss tossed. Each mission takes you through a distinct path filled with stylish set pieces, dynamic battles, and hidden power-ups to uncover that reward the player for being observant and exploring the environment. Nearly every one of these is capped off with a boss fight, which makes something usually as simple as traveling from point A to point B a major milestone to be celebrated. The one mission that showcases all of this perfectly is Mission 7. Mission 7 is what I like to call the point of no return in the DMC games, and probably character action games as a whole. You're either completely invested and end up pouring way too much of your free time into them, or you're disinterested without any real chance of that changing anytime soon. If you can't guess already, I'm in that first group of people. I still remember the very first time I played through it, and how excited I was to keep playing afterwards. From that point forward, I've been hooked on the sheer catharsis playing these types of games can bring out in their strongest moments. Everyone mentions the fight with Vergil when talking about this mission, and I do agree that he plays a huge part in what makes it so special for me. That hair, that sword, that power. There's a lot of other pieces to its greatness beyond him though, and they make the fight even better in my opinion. So that's what we're going to talk about for this video. Let's break down all the little things this one level does and how it manages to improve what came before it and what comes after. To start, let's go over the path the player and Dante have taken by the point they've reached Mission 7. Mission 1 takes place in Dante's office and serves as a quick tutorial for the basics of combat along with introducing the story. Local creepy guy Arkham delivers a message from Dante's brother, Vergil, and a giant tower called the Temini Group pops up in the middle of Citytonburg. It doesn't have a name, we're gonna call it that. Roll with me here. Mission 2 is in front of Dante's office building, where he fights off some more demons and faces the first boss of the game, the Hell Vanguard. He doesn't manage to finish it off though. The Vanguard flees to the top of the tower, we get properly introduced to Vergil, and he manages to kill the boss we just struggled to beat with a single draw of his blade. Remember this? It will be very important later. Mission 3 has Dante travel through the city until we reach the base of the tower where we fight the first actual boss, Cerberus, and we get rewarded with our first new melee weapon when we manage to beat it. This is also the first time that Dante and the secondary protagonist, Lady, meet. I don't think she likes him very much though. Missions 4, 5, and 6 all take place inside the Temini Group and have us explore different areas of the tower as we try to make our way up to the top where Vergil is waiting. The central foyer area gets revisited multiple times as we find items to open up new pathways, we acquire a couple more new weapons, meet the definitely not suspicious at all Jester who does not share the same creepy voice as Arkham, nope, and take down a couple more bosses along the way. That brings us to the start of Mission 7. These first few missions showcase one of the aspects in linear level design I really enjoy, that being a natural sense of progression through the game's world. Having the different locations a player goes through believably flow into one another makes them a lot more memorable and distinct from one another. There's a clear path that we take along with Dante from his office in the city all the way to some of the highest points of the Temini Group. It feels like with each mission cleared, we've made a huge step towards our ultimate goal. beating the crap out of Nissan. Getting new equipment and moves little by little along the way makes this feeling much more tangible too. During Mission 7, it's finally time for us to reach the top of the tower we've spent the last 3 missions exploring. This is where a non-linear level design staple works its way in: backtracking. Now, there are a bunch of people out there who hate backtracking and think it only serves as padding. While this can be true if it's executed poorly, there are plenty of games that manage to make revisiting old areas feel genuinely rewarding. The original Resident Evil games are perfect examples of this. Given Devil May Cry's beginnings as a sort of prototype for Resident Evil 4, it only makes sense that they take inspiration from the best parts of its design. However, DMC takes a much simpler approach to this by making sure that any sort of key items needed to open new areas are found and used in the same mission. This helps to make sure that you don't just accidentally wander off somewhere you're not supposed to be yet. Ever since we first stepped foot into the Temen Negru in Mission 4, there have been 2 sections of the foyer we haven't been able to access. One is a room surrounded by fire that we're unable to put out, and the other is an elevator that's out of order. Over the course of Mission 7, we find the room that powers the elevator, but it needs an energy source to get it up and running. One trip to the library and a fight with giant murder chess pieces later, and we get the item we need for it. This creates a shortcut from the upper area of the tower all the way to the entrance. It's honestly kinda just like Dark Souls. So that's done, but we still need to figure out how to get past the fire. The good news is, we probably found the item needed for this while fixing the elevator. Getting rid of 2 obstacles that have been staring us in the face every time we've gone through this room all at once is exciting. The reason this works so well is through blending both linear and non-linear design concepts. While you do go through some areas more than once throughout the game's missions and aren't able to overcome every roadblock right away, each mission has a fixed start and end point with a single main objective. What this means for us is that it should be much harder to get lost while still being able to create a massive interconnected area for us to explore and mess around in. This comes together amazingly during this mission, since you go through a bunch of places you've already been to solve puzzles that have been staring you in the face for a while by this point. The next thing I want to talk about is how the game handles difficulty. It starts off relatively tame, with Mission 1 and 2 being single encounters that let the player get accustomed to the controls in a contained environment. These are short enough that even if you end up dying and having to start over, it really doesn't feel like you've lost much progress. Mission 3 is where the challenge starts to ramp up pretty fast, having multiple encounters across different environments that require you to really consider how you approach them, lest you get BTFO. The boss fight against Cerberus is the first big wall most players hit, myself included. Hell, I even struggled a bit against him getting footage for this video, and while I'm nowhere near as good as all the people making these sick combo videos, I played through the game from start to finish plenty of times over the years. Once you manage to beat him though, the game has hopefully taught you everything you'll need to adapt and overcome the challenges to come. The missions inside the Temen Negru have you going in between the same areas a few times, which might make you think that the game would start to become stale pretty fast. Thankfully, this isn't the case at all here. It slowly begins to introduce enemy types into the mix as you progress, with at least 1 new enemy fought per mission up to this point of the game. They all have their own attack patterns, unique gimmicks, and exploitable weaknesses to take them down. For example, the murder chess pieces might be completely immune to being staggered by your attacks, but they also move incredibly slow, so it's easier to respond to their attacks. And the blood goyles, they're actually called this isn't another lame nickname, need to be damaged with firearms first, since your melee weapons cause them to split in 2. Do enough damage with your guns though, and they turn into immobile statues, easy targets for some good old button mashing! Mission 7 introduces 2 new enemies for us to take down. Well, technically it's only 1 new one, but we'll touch on that in just a bit. The first one is the 5th of the Hell Demons, Greed. These are big dudes with giant coffins they can swing around without getting staggered while they do. The coffins are more than just a weapon for them though. The Greeds are able to summon other Hell Demons with them. If you don't figure out a way to deal with these guys quickly in a fight, you can end up getting overwhelmed by all the enemies attacking at once, which the game does a fantastic job of teaching you by having your first encounters with them happen in some of the most claustrophobia-inducing arenas in the game. It's a swift kick to the groin that lets the player know, hey, we're not screwing around anymore, so you better get used to this. The second new enemy you face is introduced in the last encounter just before the big showdown on top of the tower. It's actually something the player has fought before, just not as a regular enemy. The Hell Vanguard returns from Mission 2, exactly the same as it was when you fought it initially, but without the giant boss health bar. Now, I want to take a step back to when we were talking about the initial encounter with it. After it flees from us after a pretty climactic battle, Vergil one-shots it like it's nothing. Plenty of people have already talked about how this shows the clear difference in power between Dante and Vergil by masterfully contextualizing it in a way that the player can feel through the gameplay. And that's very true, but I also think that contextualization continues past this one instance in Mission 2. It's pretty fitting that the final enemy you're required to face before fighting Vergil is the same one that he was able to defeat so effortlessly, compared to the struggle Dante had to go through at first. It's a great way for the player to see just how much stronger they've gotten since the beginning of the game. They've gotten more weapons and upgrades, sure, but more importantly, they've gotten better at the game itself. And since they've gotten better, the enemy that used to be a terrifying boss is now another basic-ass mook to get absolutely styled on. With everything that we've covered up to this point, there's just one final thing about this mission I want to talk about that I brought up all throughout this video: the fight with Vergil. The game has hyped up this confrontation before you can even make it to the main menu. The intro movie shows glimpses of Dante and Vergil fighting on top of the tower in the middle of pouring rain, as some narration from Lady ominously mentions that only one of the brothers would come out of this conflict alive. The scene ends with Vergil stabbing Dante with his own sword and appearing to secure victory for himself. This cliffhanger leaves so many questions unanswered, and it makes it all the more enticing to play through the game to get the full picture of this one moment. Once you reach Mission 7 and manage to make your way to the top of the tower, you know exactly what awaits you. The game conveys the weight of this moment beautifully. The area right before the boss is called the Moonlight Mile, which makes sense pretty quick. As soon as you step into the final area of the level, you're greeted with this incredible shot of Vergil gazing out from the tower's edge, with the shimmering moon in front of him enveloping a huge portion of the frame. It's almost completely silent as you approach. A cutscene begins, and the two brothers are totally casual in their conversation despite how unbelievable everything leading up to that moment has been. Even with them cracking jokes to one another, it's evident that there's a bunch of tension and animosity between Dante and Vergil. They talk about things that happened in a manga that never got finished, yes, I'm still sad, and at long last, it is time for our battle to begin.
Or better yet, how about a kiss from this?
Vergil is simultaneously the most simple and most difficult boss the player has faced up to this point of the game. The arena you fight him in is just the right size and circular, with no obstacles or hazards you need to be aware of. No silly gimmicks to deal with either. It's just a straightforward 1v1 battle. However, his attacks have huge hitboxes that deal plenty of damage, and they're pretty difficult to react to at first. That's because unlike the bulky demons you fought as bosses up till now with clunky movement and giant wind-up animations, Vergil doesn't have time to waste, and he wants you dead fast. There's little room for you to breathe as you try to dodge the barrage of attacks, while still trying to find whatever openings you can to slowly whittle away at his health. You'll probably die, and die again, but that's okay. With each attempt, you get just a little bit closer. Recognize his patterns a bit sooner. As his health bar nears its end, his meticulously coiffed hair falls loose from the battle and rain, until finally, you defeat him. At least that's what you might think. It turns out that Vergil's been holding back on us this whole time. After what's admittedly a really badass action scene, you get to see how the full scene from the intro plays out. Vergil chastises Dante for not embracing his demonic heritage's strength, while Dante completely denies that heritage altogether. Vergil runs his brother through with his katana, then delivers one of the greatest lines in this entire series.
Foolishness, Dante. Foolishness. Might controls everything, and without strength, you cannot protect anything, let alone yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Quantum Ranger. Dante falls to the ground, apparently dead, only for him to begin to struggle to his feet before Vergil pins him to the ground with his own sword, and oh so suavely sets his hair back into place with the power of PS2 graphics. This is where the intro movie ended, and it looks like it's the end for Dante as well. Only for him to awaken as a completely different person. As a demon. I love everything about this moment. That scene you see in the intro is given full context and closure after playing the game for so long, wondering how and when you'll get to that point. As humiliated as you feel after the fight, you also gain the ability to use Dante's signature Devil Trigger transformation ability. You realize that this was just the first act of the game, and that there's so much more left for you to experience. Everything from this point forward is only going to get more difficult, more complex, more insane. Mission 7 is the perfect shifting gears the game needs to make what comes after it feel like a natural progression, while also being the climax the opening hours needed to feel like all the hard work you put into learning the game was worth it. It's not the hardest, and there are missions in the game that I like more than it, but I think it's the most important one. Hopefully, with everything we've talked about up to this point, you can kind of get why I think that way. The smallest details in how a level is designed can make such a huge difference in how it feels to play through it. I'm really glad that I can appreciate these sorts of things now much more than when I was growing up. As we close the video, I'd like to leave you with a challenge. I want you to think of one of your favorite levels from a game. Any genre, doesn't even need to be a traditional get to the goal, get to the end point, type of level. Just a part of a game that you really like. If you're able to, play through it and try to really pay attention to any aspects of its design that make you love it as much as you do. You might end up finding a new perspective to look at it from that lets you enjoy it even more. I know I did with this.